Here are a few of the stranger things people have found out about someone they knew. Number 9. All in the family. Dating your sibling is probably one of the worst things we can think of. Well, some parts of the internet will have you believing it's all the rage, but we're pretty sure all those scenarios are just make-believe. One couple from South Africa are probably wishing they had met each other's parents a little bit earlier into their relationship. The unnamed couple met while attending the same university, fell in love at first sight, and started a 5-year-long relationship before finally deciding to get married. This couple wanted their single parents, his dad and her mom, to meet each other, just like most of any other couple would. Unfortunately, that meeting wasn't as joyful as they had all hoped. When each of their respective parents met, they quickly realized they already knew each other very well. They used to be married. Their parents had split up decades ago because their mom was cheating on their dad. The dad took care of his own son, and the mom raised the daughter on her own. But really, though, why wouldn't the parents at least tell the kids they had a sibling? Especially if they were supposedly only living 50 miles apart. As if a 5-year relationship with your sibling isn't bad enough, the girl was already pregnant and they were expecting their first child the next month. They eventually decided to split up, but I mean, would they tell their kid? What would you guys do? Let us know in the comments section. Number 8. Rich man, poor man. Imagine being born to a rich family, but the twist is you never knew about it until you're 60. In what sounds like an outrageous movie plot, the baby of a wealthy Japanese family was switched with a poor Japanese family, causing the two babies to swap very different lives. What's more, the mistake wasn't uncovered until 60 years later in 2013. After both babies had grown up in completely opposite life circumstances. The Japanese man who ended up living with the rich family grew up with a personal tutor and went on to run a successful real estate company. The rich family's actual child was instead raised in poverty. He had to go to night school while working in a factory before eventually becoming a truck driver. He never married and instead focused on taking care of who he thought were his real brothers, one of whom had a stroke. The mix-up was only discovered after the other siblings of the wealthy family noticed that their oldest brother looked nothing like them. They had a DNA test done, which finally revealed the truth. Tragically, the parents of the family passed away before the test was performed, so their actual biological brother never got to meet his real parents. His only compensation for missing out on the chance to meet his parents and to live an entirely different life was the $350,000 the Tokyo District Court ordered the hospital to pay for their mistake. The one happy takeaway from the story, the man was pleased to learn that his biological brothers wanted to build a relationship to make up for all the years together they missed. Number 7. Lying doesn't pay. When most people win the lottery, they take it as an opportunity to go on a dream vacation or buy a new car. But for one woman in California, it was time to divorce her husband. After winning the California state lottery, Denise Rossi quickly filed for divorce from her husband Thomas of 25 years, but forgot to mention one tiny detail, which was the $1.3 million she had just won. Denise didn't tell anyone about her $1.3 million win, which she won just 11 days before filing for her divorce. Her ex-husband Thomas didn't find out about her win for 2 years. He found out by getting a letter addressed to Denise from a company that pays out lump sums to lottery winners, and he basically put 2 and 2 together. After he figured it out, he took her to court. Because of California state laws, Denise actually would have only owed Thomas half of her winnings in the divorce if she had told the truth from the beginning. You guys can see where this is going, right? But since she had broken the law and concealed her winnings, a judge ruled that she instead had to forfeit the entire amount to Thomas. The judge ruled that Denise acted out of malice or fraud. She had admitted in court to concealing her winnings in order to keep it from Thomas, violating state disclosure laws. For Denise, that's one very expensive lesson in learning to tell the truth. Number 6. Take your son to work day. Nathan Booz, a truck driver from Wisconsin, had always known that he was adopted. However, even with that piece of information, he never put much thought into meeting his biological parents. And while some adopted children have to put in a lot of legal work to find out where they came from, Nathan discovered that he had already known his dad for years. For 2 years, Nathan had been friends with Bob DeGarro, a co-worker at the company Rock Solid Transport, where they both worked. So how did they actually find out they were father and son? They were connected on Facebook, which Nathan's adoptive mother noticed one day. Turns out, that Nathan's biological mom had left him with a distant relative who had known who his father was all along. When she pointed out that one of his Facebook friends was actually Nathan's dad, he couldn't believe it. Neither could Bob when he found out that one of his coworkers was his own son. Fortunately, the story has a happy ending. Bob says that he had to give Nathan up as a child because the family just couldn't afford to take care of him. But now that they've reunited, they plan to remain close friends. Of course, Bob made plans to attend Nathan's wedding soon after he learned that he was his son. Number 5. The ultimate deadbeat dad. Back in 1968, Barbara Grenstead was heartbroken when her husband Douglas suddenly seemed to decide to disappear during a hunting trip. The community rallied to find him, but he simply vanished. For years, Barbara and her 2 young daughters, Beth and Lynn, waited for their dad to show up again. After 7 long years of waiting, he was assumed to have just passed away. Fast forward to December 2018, and Barbara and her daughters went through not one, but 2 more devastations. The first devastation was that they found out that he was alive the whole time. Turns out that Douglas had faked his own death during the hunting trip in order to run away with his mistress. He got a new identity of Richard Morley and never contacted anyone he knew, even his parents, who actually had just passed away right before he resurfaced. However, in 2015, just before he actually died, Douglas confessed that he had been living this whole time under a false name in a confession letter to the Social Security Administration, and it made things even worse for Barbara and their daughters. The second devastation was that Barbara and her daughters owed over $100,000. They had received more than $100,000 of Social Security benefits after Douglas's supposed death. But because of his confession, they were supposed to pay it back. Sadly, Barbara passed away shortly after learning the shocking truth, but her daughters are still fighting the government to waive the debt caused by their ultimate deadbeat dad. But really though, why would he confess after all this time? Number 4. Infertility. Imagine getting a 1-2 combination to the gut. That's essentially what Richard Mason experienced when he received a double batch of bad news from his doctor back in 2016. Not only did Richard learn that he has cystic fibrosis, but he also found out that the disease had rendered him infertile since birth. That's definitely quite a shock for anyone, but especially so for a man with 3 kids. When Richard got the news, he immediately filed a paternity fraud suit against his ex-wife, whom he had spent 20 years raising his sons with. It was only then, 10 years after their divorce, that she admitted that she had been cheating on him, although she refused to tell him who the biological father of his children were. Although the news sent Richard into a depression for a while, things aren't all going so badly for him now. Richard remarried a couple years before the shocking revelation, and at least one of his sons has reached out to say that he still considers Richard his father. Oh, and did we forget to mention that Richard is a millionaire? That may help explain why he's been getting a lot of attention from single women since his story was exposed. However, sorry ladies, Richard says he's a one-woman man. Richard has plans to write a book about his experience. We're definitely sure there are plenty of other guys this happens to, so a book on dealing with it probably can help out. Number 3, brother from another mother. You would think that meeting your long-lost brother would be a cause for celebration. But nothing could be further from the truth for 2 men who appeared on a British tabloid talk show, The Jeremy Kyle Show, in 2015. You guys know going on these type of shows means nothing good ever happens, right? Paul and Lee first met on a dating site and spent 2 years flirting through text messages before eventually hooking up and started to date in real life. As their relationship progressed, Lee decided to introduce Paul to his family. They were a bit puzzled when they noticed that Paul looked suspiciously similar to Lee's mother's ex-husband. So they decided that they wanted to clear all suspicion from their friends and family. The 2 men decided to clear things up by going on the talk show. Hey, why not get paid and get a free DNA test, right? They didn't really believe in any way possible they were actually brothers because, come on, who would believe if it was someone told you someone you're dating is your sibling? However, they were as shocked as can be when the DNA test revealed that they were actually half-brothers. As you can imagine, it took quite a while for the shock to wear off. Paul and Lee basically had 30 seconds of the most awkward silence imaginable in front of the show's audience. Eventually, though, they were able to speak again, and they reportedly remain on good terms in their now very different relationship as brothers. Number 2, Dad does what? Imagine learning a shocking fact you didn't know about one of your parents. Then imagine learning about that fact on the radio. Hollywood actor Woody Harrelson has played all kinds of tough characters on screen, But as it turns out, his tough guy persona may run in his blood. Though Woody's street cred comes from the fictional characters he's played, his dad actually lived the life of a hitman and mob enforcer. Charles Harrelson first turned to a life of crime to pay off gambling debts and a risky loan he'd taken out from the mafia. Despite his wild streak, Charles had time to marry and even have a kid. Then in 1968, he left his wife Diane and their son Woody behind. Just a few months later, he killed a man as part of a life insurance scheme, a crime that he somehow only spent 5 years in prison for. At the time, Woody had no clue of his dad's reputation. He first learned that his dad was a hitman when he was 12 years old after hearing a report about his dad's murder trial on the radio. That wasn't the end of Charles's days as a hitman either. Only a year after his release from prison, he killed a district judge, sending him to jail for the rest of his life. Once Woody became famous, and presumably after the shock of learning that his dad was a hitman had worn off, he visited his dad in prison and struck up a friendship with him. Woody even tried to get his dad released early, although his attempts never paid off. Number 1. Best bill ever. No one likes bills, especially any bill that's in the thousands. However, for one couple in Russia, receiving a $4,100 unpaid bill in 2017 from an orphanage turned out to be the best news they had ever received. Back in 2011, the couple had a baby, but hospital workers told the new parents that their child would not survive longer than a week. They reluctantly signed a waiver to leave the baby to the hospital's care and left, but when they changed their minds and returned a few days later, they were told that the baby had already passed. Fast forward a few years, the Russian woman went to take out money from her bank and surprisingly found that her bank account had been blocked by the country's federal bailiff service. When she showed up at the government department's office to find out why, she was shown a bill for boarding her child at an orphanage. It turns out that after all those years, their baby had not actually passed away, but she had been living in an orphanage since 2011. In November 2017, the child was legally reunited with her parents after a judge heard their story. But really, why did the hospital tell the couple their baby didn't make it? And why didn't the hospital just give the parents a call after they realized the baby was still alive instead of dropping her off at an orphanage? Especially when the orphanage knew who to contact. Here's what's next.